Captain Alicia Brennan had always known that flying the unglamorous A-10 Warthog meant being overlooked, but she never expected complete dismissal from her own command. Standing in the briefing room at Joint Operations Base Whitman, she watched. Colonel David Harrison flipped through his aircraft roster like he was browsing a restaurant menu, completely ignoring her raised hand. "We need fast response capabilities," Harrison barked to his staff, his perfectly pressed uniform reflecting his obsession with appearances over substance. "Modern aircraft only. I want sleek, I want fast, I want impressive." Alicia had been stationed at Whitman for 6 months, ever since her transfer from overseas combat operations. Her record spoke for itself: 3 tours, 47 successful close air support missions, 0 friendly fire incidents, and a reputation for surgical precision that had earned respect from ground troops across 2 theaters of war. But Harrison had made his opinion clear from day one. The A-10 was obsolete, and pilots who flew flying tanks belonged in the past. "Sir," Alicia finally spoke up, her voice cutting through the chatter of junior officers. "The A-10 provides unmatched ground support capabilities in contested environments." Harrison's head snapped toward her, his cold blue eyes narrowing with undisguised irritation. "Captain Brennan, when I need outdated opinions about outdated aircraft, I'll ask for them. Until then, please remember that modern warfare requires modern solutions." The room fell silent. Alicia felt the weight of every stare, some sympathetic, others awkwardly looking away. Her squadron mate, Captain Jake Morrison, caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod of support. But even he couldn't speak up without risking his own standing. "The A-10 has proven its worth in," Alicia began. "The A-10," Harrison interrupted, his voice rising just enough to establish dominance, "is a relic from the Cold War. It's slow, it's ugly, and it's embarrassing to have parked on my flight line. Modern conflicts demand speed, stealth, and sophistication qualities. Your aircraft notably lacks." Heat rose in Alicia's cheeks, but she maintained her composure. Years of combat had taught her to control her emotions, even when facing enemy fire. But this felt different. This felt personal. "Sir, with respect, ground troops in contested zones need close air support, not air shows." "The A-10, enough." Harrison slammed his folder shut. "Captain Brennan, your aircraft will be assigned to training missions only. No combat operations, no emergency response, no real-world missions. Perhaps flying circles around the practice range will give you time to consider transitioning to a more relevant aircraft." The dismissal hit like a physical blow. Alicia had spent the last 8 years perfecting her skills in the Warthog, learning its capabilities and limitations until she could make the ungainly aircraft dance through hostile skies. The A-10 wasn't just her plane, it was an extension of herself, a tool she'd used to save countless lives. "Sir, my proficiency ratings are noted and filed," Harrison cut her off. "This meeting is about operational readiness for real missions, not practice exercises. You're dismissed, Captain." Alicia felt every eye in the room as she executed a perfect about-face and walked toward the door. Her footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet briefing room, each step feeling like a retreat from everything she'd worked to achieve. As she reached for the door handle, she heard Harrison continue his briefing as if nothing had happened. "Now, for actual combat readiness, I want our F-35 and V-18 squadrons prepared for rapid deployment scenarios. Speed and precision, gentlemen. That's what wins modern wars." Outside in the corridor, Alicia leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. The Florida humidity pressed against the windows, and she could see her A-10 parked on the distant flight line, looking small and stubby compared to the sleek fires surrounding it. For the first time in her military career, she felt truly alone. Jake Morrison emerged from the briefing room a few minutes later, shaking his head in disgust. That was complete garbage, Alicia. Everyone in there knows you're the best close air support pilot on base. Everyone except the one who matters, Alicia replied, pushing herself off the wall. Give it time. Harrison's new. He'll figure out what real combat experience looks like. Alicia wished she could share Jake's optimism, but she'd seen Harrison's type before, officers who cared more about appearance than effectiveness, more about politics than the lives of the soldiers depending on them. The difference was that she'd never been stuck serving under one. That evening, Alicia sat in her small base quarters, staring at photos from her deployment. Images of grateful ground troops, successful rescue operations, moments when her obsolete A-10 had meant the difference between life and death for American soldiers. Harrison could dismiss her aircraft, but he couldn't dismiss the lives it had saved. She picked up her phone and scrolled through messages from former colleagues still deployed overseas. Stories of close calls, successful missions, requests for advice on ground attack tactics. The respect she'd earned in combat zones felt like it belonged to a different person, someone who mattered, someone whose expertise was valued. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Chief Master Sergeant Robert Hayes, the base's senior enlisted advisor, and someone whose opinion carried weight even with Harrison. Evening, Captain. Mind if I come in? Alicia stepped aside, curious about the unexpected visit. I heard about the briefing today, Hayes said, settling into the small chair across from her. Word travels fast on a base this size. I'm sure it does. Hayes studied her for a moment. You know, I've been in this business for 24 years. I've seen a lot of aircraft come and go, a lot of pilots rise and fall, but I've never seen anyone handle an A-10 like you do. Colonel Harrison might disagree with that assessment. Colonel Harrison's been in command for 3 months. I've been watching pilots for 2.5 decades. Hayes leaned forward. That man has never been in a real combat situation where lives depended on split-second decisions. You have. Alicia appreciated the sergeant's words, but they didn't change her situation. Unfortunately, combat experience doesn't seem to matter much in peacetime assignments. Maybe not, Hayes agreed. But peacetime has a way of ending suddenly. And when it does, this base is going to need pilots who know how to fight, not just how to look good in formation flying. As Hayes left, his words lingered in Alicia's mind. She looked out her window at the flight line, where her A-10 sat under the harsh floodlights, waiting patiently for a mission that might never come. Harrison had made his position clear. There was no place for her aircraft or her expertise in his modern Air Force. But Alicia had learned something important during her years of combat. Sometimes the most crucial battles weren't fought in the sky. Sometimes they were fought right here at home, against people who'd forgotten what real warfare looked like. She wasn't sure how yet, but she was determined to prove that both she and her aircraft still had value. The A-10 might be ugly and slow, but it was also tough, reliable, and deadly effective when lives were on the line. Just like its pilot. 2 weeks after the briefing room humiliation, Alicia discovered that Harrison's dismissive attitude had infected the entire command structure. What started as training mission assignments had devolved into busy work endless. Pattern flying, equipment checks that led nowhere, and maintenance inspections that felt more like punishment detail than pilot duties. Brennan, Lieutenant Colonel Stevens called out as she walked past the mission planning room. Colonel Harrison wants to see your flight logs from yesterday's training exercise. Alicia paused, suspicious. She'd flown a perfect training mission, executed every maneuver flawlessly, and returned with no discrepancies. Is there a problem with my performance, sir? Stevens, normally a fair officer, looked uncomfortable. Just getting the logs, Captain. In Harrison's office, Alicia watched as he scrutinized her paperwork with theatrical intensity, hunting for any flaw that could justify further marginalization. His desk displayed photos of himself with various dignitaries, awards from peacetime, assignments, and a gleaming model of an F-35, everything except evidence of real combat experience. "Your fuel consumption seems high," Harrison finally announced, looking up with satisfaction. Alicia blinked. "Sir, I flew a standard training profile. Fuel consumption was well within normal parameters." "Normal for what?" "Your obsolete aircraft burns through fuel like a truck. Do you understand the cost implications of maintaining such inefficient machines?" The accusation was absurd. The A-10 was actually known for reasonable fuel efficiency compared to the high-performance fighters Harrison favored. But Alicia recognized the game being played create problems where none existed to justify predetermined decisions. "Sir, if you check the comparative consumption data, I don't need to check anything, Captain. I need pilots who understand resource management and fiscal responsibility. Your aircraft represents exactly the kind of waste this command will not tolerate." Harrison stood and walked to his window, gazing out at the flight line where her A-10 sat isolated from the other aircraft. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. "Perhaps it's time to consider your career options," Harrison continued without turning around. "There are transport assignments available. Cargo runs, personnel transport, logistics support. Less glamorous than combat, but more appropriate for pilots of your particular skill set." The suggestion hit like a slap. Harrison was essentially offering her a career dead end. Assignments that would end any hope of promotion or meaningful contribution to military aviation. She'd seen it happen to other pilots who'd fallen out of favor, shuffled off to fly supply runs until they either resigned in frustration or accepted career mediocrity. "Sir, I'm qualified for combat operations. You're qualified for whatever I say you're qualified for," Harrison snapped, finally turning to face her. "And right now, I'm not seeing combat readiness. I'm seeing stubbornness, inefficiency, and an unhealthy attachment to obsolete equipment." Alicia left Harrison's office feeling like she'd been systematically dismantled. The message was clear: conform to his vision or face career destruction. But conforming meant abandoning everything she'd worked for, everything she believed in about military aviation and the role of close air support. At lunch, she sat alone in the officers' mess, noticing how other pilots avoided her table. Word had spread about Harrison's disapproval, and in the military's social ecosystem, association with a commander's target could be career suicide. Even Jake Morrison, her closest ally, had to limit their interactions to avoid appearing insubordinate. The isolation was working exactly as intended. Chief Hayes appeared at her table uninvited, carrying his tray with the confidence of someone whose position was secure regardless of command politics. "Mind if I sit down, Captain?" Alicia gestured to the empty chairs around her. "Plenty of room, Chief. As you can see, I'm not exactly popular company these days." Hayes settled across from her and began eating methodically. After a few minutes of silence, he spoke without looking up from his food. "You know, I served with a pilot once who faced a similar situation. Outstanding combat record. Flew an aircraft that wasn't fashionable anymore. Got marginalized by a commanding officer who cared more about appearance than capability. What happened to him? Actually, she stuck to her principles, kept her skills sharp, and waited for circumstances to change. Eventually, they did. Alicia appreciated the encouragement, but her situation felt different. What if circumstances don't change? What if Harrison decides to make an example of me?" Hayes finally looked up, his weathered face serious. "Then you'll have to decide what matters more, your career or your integrity. But I'll tell you this. The military needs pilots who understand what real combat looks like. Maybe not today, maybe not in this command, but eventually." That afternoon, Alicia received her next assignment. ferrying a cargo of spare parts to a supply depot 300 miles away. It was exactly the kind of meaningless transport duty Harrison had suggested, designed to keep her busy and irrelevant. She prepared for the mission with professional efficiency, conducting her pre-flight inspection with the same thoroughness she'd use for a combat operation. The A-10 might be relegated to cargo runs, but she wouldn't let standards slip. Her aircraft deserved better than that. As she taxied toward the runway, she noticed Harrison standing outside the command tower, watching her departure with obvious satisfaction. He'd succeeded in neutralizing what he saw as a problem, reducing a combat-proven pilot to a glorified delivery service. But Harrison had made a crucial miscalculation. He assumed that marginalization would break her spirit, that professional isolation would force her to accept his assessment of her worth. Instead, it had done something else entirely. It had reminded her that some things were more important than career advancement. Flying alone toward the supply depot, Alicia felt a strange sense of freedom. Away from Harrison's disapproving stare and the base's toxic atmosphere, she remembered why she'd become a pilot in the first place. It wasn't for recognition or advancement. It was for the pure satisfaction of mastering a difficult machine and using that mastery to accomplish important missions. The A-10 responded to her touch like an old friend, steady and reliable despite its unglamorous reputation. Harrison could dismiss the aircraft as obsolete, but Alicia knew better. She'd seen what it could do when lives were on the line, experienced its unique capabilities in situations where more glamorous aircraft would have failed. As she flew through the clear Florida sky, a plan began forming in her mind. If Harrison wanted to treat her like she didn't matter, fine, but she wouldn't abandon her principles or her aircraft. She'd find another way to serve, another way to prove that experience and dedication mattered more than politics and appearance. The cargo mission was completed flawlessly, but Alicia knew it wouldn't matter to Harrison. In his mind, she was already written off, a problem solved through marginalization and professional exile. He had no idea that he'd just made the mistake. That would ultimately expose his complete lack of understanding about what military aviation really meant. Alicia Brennan was about to become a very dangerous opponent. 3 months into Harrison's campaign of professional destruction, Alicia faced the ultimate humiliation. Standing in the base communications center at 0430 hours, she watched as an emergency call came through from Alpha Squad, 12 soldiers trapped behind enemy lines in a classified operation zone, taking heavy artillery fire with no extraction route available. Any station. This is Alpha Squad requesting immediate air support. The desperate voice crackled through the radio. We are taking heavy fire and need immediate extraction assistance. Harrison burst through the communications center doors, still adjusting his uniform from being awakened by the emergency alert. His usual composed arrogance was replaced by the frantic energy of someone facing his first real crisis. What's our air response capability? He demanded. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez checked the status board. Sir, our F-35 squadron is grounded for scheduled maintenance, and our F-18 unit is currently refueling after night training exercises. Estimated ready time is 45 minutes minimum. 45 minutes? Harrison's voice cracked slightly. Those soldiers don't have 45 minutes. The radio crackled again, more urgent now. Any station, this is Alpha Squad. Enemy artillery is getting closer. We need air support now, or we're not making it out. Alicia stepped forward, her heart racing as she recognized the tactical situation. This was exactly the kind of scenario where the A-10's unique capabilities could make the difference between life and death. Sir, I can be airborne in 5 minutes. The A-10 is perfect for close air support in contested areas. Absolutely not. Harrison's rejection was immediate and absolute. I need real fighters, not museum pieces. Sir, Those soldiers will receive proper air support from proper aircraft, Harrison snapped. Get me options with actual combat capability. Rodriguez checked his board again, desperation creeping into his voice. Sir, the nearest available fighter squadron is at MacDill Air Force Base. Even with emergency authorization, they're looking at minimum 20 minutes flight time. The math was simple and deadly. 12 American soldiers had maybe 10 minutes before enemy artillery overran their position, but the earliest possible official air support was 20 minutes away. Alicia had seen this calculation before, in combat zones where seconds determined whether people lived or died. Sir, please, she pleaded. My aircraft is fueled, armed, and ready. I can be over their position before. Captain Brennan, you are not authorized for combat operations, Harrison thundered. Your aircraft is not suitable for modern combat scenarios, and I will not risk this command's reputation on obsolete equipment, operated by a pilot I've already determined is unfit for real missions. The words hit Alicia like physical blows. Unfit for real missions. She thought of her 47 successful combat operations, the ground troops who were alive because of her precision and courage, the enemy position she'd neutralized with surgical accuracy. The radio erupted again. Any station, we're being overrun. We need air support immediately. Harrison grabbed the microphone. Alpha Squad, this is Base Command. Air support is en route. Maintain your position. How long? Came the desperate response. Harrison looked at Rodriguez, who held up 2 fingers and mouthed, 20 minutes. 15 minutes. Harrison lied into the microphone. Alicia watched in horror as Harrison chose politics over lives, reputation over reality. The lie about response. Time made it worse. Those soldiers would hold positions and take risks they couldn't afford because they believed help was coming sooner than possible. Sir, I can save them, Alicia said, her voice quiet but intense. You can follow orders, Harrison replied coldly. Which means you will not take off without authorization. You will not engage in unauthorized combat operations, and you will not embarrass this command with your obsolete aircraft and questionable judgment. The finality in Harrison's voice was unmistakable. He'd rather let soldiers die than admit he might be wrong about the A-10's capabilities. His ego was literally worth more to him than American lives. Alicia felt something break inside her, not her spirit, but her willingness to let bureaucracy triumph over duty. She joined the military to serve something greater than herself, to use her skills to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Harrison had reduced that sacred responsibility to a political calculation. Understood, sir, she said quietly. But as she walked away from the communications center, Alicia's mind was racing. Harrison had forbidden her from taking off, but he hadn't actually confined her to base or posted guards on her aircraft. He was so confident in his authority that he couldn't imagine anyone defying him. That overconfidence was about to become a fatal miscalculation. Alicia reached her quarters and quickly changed into her flight suit. She grabbed her helmet and survival gear, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd prepared for combat operations hundreds of times. Every motion was automatic, muscle memory taking over as her conscious mind focused on the tactical situation. Alpha Squad was trapped in hostile territory, taking artillery fire with no official help coming for 20 minutes. But there was unofficial help available, an A-10 Warthog armed and ready, piloted by someone who'd performed exactly this type of mission before. The walk to the flight line felt like the longest of her career. Every step was a decision to choose duty over orders, lives over career, what was right over what was authorized. She'd never directly disobeyed a commanding officer before, but she'd also never been commanded to let soldiers die while she sat idle. Her A-10 waited on the tarmac like a faithful guardian, ugly and unglamorous but deadly effective. As she performed her pre-flight inspection, Alicia realized that everything in her career had led to this moment. All the training, all the combat experience, all the knowledge she'd accumulated, it only mattered if she was willing to use it when it counted most. The aircraft systems came online perfectly, engines spinning up with their characteristic whine. Ground crew members stared in confusion as she powered up without authorization, but none of them tried to stop her. They knew what was happening on the radio, and they understood what her departure meant. As she taxied toward the runway, Alicia saw lights coming on in the command tower. Someone had noticed her unauthorized movement and was probably calling Harrison right now. She had maybe 2 minutes before someone tried to order her to shut down. That was more than enough time. The A-10 lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, its navigation lights disappearing into the distance as Alicia headed toward a confrontation that would either save 12 lives or end her career. Possibly both. But for the first time in months, Captain Alicia Brennan felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Racing through the darkness at low altitude, Alicia switched her radio to the emergency frequency and heard Alpha Squad's increasingly desperate calls for help. Her navigation system showed 18 minutes to their coordinates, cutting it impossibly close, but still their best hope for survival. Any station, we're taking direct hits, came the strained voice from the ground. Artillery is walking toward our position. We need immediate air support. Alicia keyed her microphone, using a call sign she hadn't spoken in years. Alpha Squad, this is Raven 1-3. I have eyes on your general area and am inbound to your position. The response came back filled with desperate relief. Raven 1-3. Thank God. We're in a rocky outcropping about 2 clicks north of Checkpoint Delta. Enemy artillery is firing from elevated positions to our east and south. Copy, Alpha Squad. I'll be over your position in 15 minutes. Keep your heads down and mark your position with infrared strobes. Behind her, Alicia knew that Harrison was probably having the meltdown of his career. Unauthorized takeoff. Direct disobedience of orders, and worst of all from his perspective, the possibility that his dismissed obsolete aircraft might actually succeed where his modern fighters couldn't respond in time. The terrain below shifted from flat coastal Florida to the more mountainous regions where Alpha Squad was conducting their classified operation. Alicia dropped her altitude even lower, using the darkness and terrain masking to avoid detection by enemy radar systems that might be operating in the area. Her radio crackled with a transmission from base command. Harrison's voice, tight with fury. Raven 1-3, you are ordered to return to base immediately. You are not authorized for this mission. Alicia switched off that frequency and focused on her tactical display. She could see Alpha Squad's position, now marked by the tiny infrared strobes that were invisible to enemy forces, but clear as day through her night vision systems. Enemy artillery positions showed up as heat signatures on the surrounding hills. Alpha Squad, Raven 1-3 has visual on your position. I count 3 enemy artillery positions. Are you able to mark targets with laser designation? Negative, Raven 1-3. Our targeting equipment was damaged. Can you engage without laser guidance? The question sent a chill through Alicia. Engaging artillery positions without laser guidance meant relying entirely on visual targeting and pilot skill, the kind of old-school flying that Harrison dismissed as obsolete, but that she'd perfected over years of combat operations. Affirmative, Alpha Squad. Visual targeting only. Danger close engagement. Keep everyone down and away from the eastern perimeter. Alicia banked the A-10 into her attack run, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with combat operations. This was what she'd trained for, what she'd lived for during her deployment years. The aircraft responded to her touch like an extension of her will, steady and precise despite the challenging conditions. The first artillery position appeared. In her sights, a concealed gun emplacement that had been raining death on the trapped soldiers. Alicia centered her targeting reticle, compensated for wind and distance, and squeezed the trigger. The A-10's go-at cannon erupted with its distinctive sound, sending a stream of depleted uranium rounds into the enemy position. The artillery piece disappeared in a brilliant explosion, its ammunition storage detonating a secondary blast that lit up the mountainside. Direct hit on target 1, came the excited voice from Alpha Squad. Beautiful shooting, Raven 1-3. But Alicia was already lining up her second attack run. The remaining artillery positions had spotted her and were adjusting their fire to engage the attacking aircraft. Tracer rounds began reaching up toward her position, creating deadly light shows in the darkness. She rolled the A-10 into a steep dive, using her speed and the aircraft's notorious durability to punch through the enemy fire. The second artillery position tried to track her movement, but Alicia's approach angle made their fire ineffective. Another burst from the GAU-8, another perfect hit. The second artillery position vanished in flame and smoke. Target 2 neutralized. Alpha Squad reported. One more position to the south. The final artillery piece was the most dangerous, positioned on higher ground with a clear field of fire and operated by a crew that had learned from watching their comrades get destroyed. They waited until Alicia committed to her attack run before opening fire with everything they had. Anti-aircraft rounds filled the air around the A-10, several finding their mark. Alicia felt the aircraft shudder as bullets punched through the armored skin, but the Warthog's legendary toughness kept it flying. She maintained her attack angle despite the damage, knowing that this was her only chance to eliminate the threat. Her final burst was perfect. Precision strike that destroyed the artillery position and neutralized the immediate threat to Alpha Squad. All targets destroyed, she radioed to the ground team. Area clear for extraction. Raven 1-3, you just saved 12 lives, came the grateful response. We're moving to extraction point now. Thank you. As Alicia climbed away from the target area, she performed a quick damage assessment. The A-10 had taken several hits, but nothing critical. Hydraulics were functioning, engines were strong, and flight controls were responsive. The aircraft had done exactly what it was designed to do: absorb punishment and keep fighting. Her radio crackled with another transmission from Harrison. Raven 1-3, you will land immediately at the nearest military facility and consider yourself under arrest. Alicia switched off the radio entirely. She'd accomplished the mission, saved 12 lives, and proven that experience and the right aircraft could succeed where bureaucracy and modern equipment had failed. Whatever consequences awaited her, they were worth it. The flight back to base gave her time to think about what she'd just done. She'd directly disobeyed orders, conducted an unauthorized combat operation, and proven her commanding officer catastrophically wrong. Her military career was probably over, but 12 soldiers were going home to their families. It was a trade she'd make again, without hesitation. As Base Whitman appeared on the horizon, Alicia could see emergency vehicles lining the runway and security personnel waiting near her parking spot. Harrison had prepared a reception committee for her return. She brought the battle-damaged A-10 in for a perfect landing, the aircraft touching down smoothly despite the punishment it had taken. As she taxied toward her parking spot, Alicia saw the crowd of personnel gathered to witness her arrival, some hostile, others curious, but many wearing expressions of grudging respect. She'd kept her word to Alpha Squad, brought them home alive, and demonstrated the true value of both her aircraft and her experience. Now it was time to face the consequences and discover whether the military she'd served faithfully for 8 years had any room for someone who put duty before politics. The A-10's engines wound down as Alicia completed her shutdown procedures. Through her canopy, she could see Harrison approaching with security personnel and a face full of barely controlled rage. Captain, Alicia Brennan had just won the most important battle of her career. Now she had to survive the aftermath, the interrogation. Room at Base Whitman felt like a courthouse, complete with a formal recording device and 3 officers seated across from Alicia like a tribunal. Harrison sat at the center, flanked by Lieutenant Colonel Stevens and Major Patricia Walsh from the Judge Advocate General's office. The charges were serious enough to end her career and potentially result in court-martial proceedings. Captain Brennan, Major Walsh began, consulting her legal pad. You stand accused of directly disobeying orders, conducting unauthorized combat operations, and recklessly endangering military assets. These are serious charges that could result in dismissal from service and criminal prosecution. Alicia sat straight in her chair, still wearing her flight suit from the mission. She'd refused Harrison's offer to change clothes or consult with legal counsel, knowing that any delay might give him time to control the narrative. I understand the charges, ma'am. Harrison leaned forward, his face flushed with anger. What? I want to understand is how a pilot I've repeatedly told is unfit for combat operations thought she had the authority to override my direct commands and engage in unauthorized warfare. Sir, 12 American soldiers were in immediate danger. 12 soldiers who were receiving proper air support through proper channels, Harrison interrupted. You had no authorization, no oversight, and no backup. You could have been shot, down, captured, or killed, creating an international incident. Major Walsh consulted her notes. Captain Brennan, Colonel Harrison states that he explicitly forbade you from engaging in combat operations and ordered you to remain on base. Is that accurate? Yes, ma'am. And you chose to disobey those orders? Alicia met Walsh's steady gaze. I chose to save lives, ma'am. Alpha Squad had maybe 5 minutes before enemy artillery overran their position. The nearest authorized air support was 20 minutes away. That's not your calculation to make, Harrison snapped. Command decisions are made by commanders, not by insubordinate pilots with questionable judgment. Stevens, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Captain, walk us through your decision-making process. What made you think unauthorized action was justified? Alicia had prepared for this question during the flight home. Sir, I weighed the certain death of 12 soldiers against the possible consequences of disobedience. In my professional judgment, based on 8 years of combat experience, those soldiers had no chance of survival without immediate air support. Your professional judgment? Harrison's voice dripped with contempt. Your professional judgment has been consistently wrong throughout your assignment here. Your aircraft is obsolete, your tactics are outdated, and your inability to accept. Modern military doctrine has been noted repeatedly in your fitness reports. Walsh held up a hand to silence Harrison. Colonel, let's focus on the facts of this specific incident. Captain Brennan, describe the tactical situation you encountered. For the next hour, Alicia detailed every aspect of the mission. The enemy positions, the artillery threat, the precision required for danger-close engagement, and the successful neutralization of all targets without friendly casualties. She spoke with the calm professionalism of someone who'd performed similar missions dozens of times. According to your account, Walsh noted, you engaged 3 enemy positions using visual targeting only, in darkness, with friendly forces in close proximity. That seems extraordinarily risky. Ma'am, it was the only viable option. Alpha Squads. Laser designation equipment was damaged, and the tactical situation required immediate engagement. The Aten's cannon system is specifically designed for precision close air support in exactly these conditions. Harrison slammed his hand on the table. The Aten's cannon system is 40 years old. Modern aircraft have precision-guided munitions. advanced targeting systems, and capabilities your museum piece can't match. Sir, Alicia replied evenly, modern aircraft weren't available. My aircraft was. The simple truth of that statement hung in the air like a challenge. Harrison had spent months dismissing the A-10's capabilities and Alicia's experience. But when lives were on the line, his preferred modern fighters had been unavailable while her obsolete aircraft had saved the day. Stevens leaned back in his chair. Captain, what was the outcome of your engagement? All enemy artillery positions were neutralized. Alpha Squad successfully reached their extraction point, and all 12 personnel returned safely. No friendly casualties, no collateral damage. And your aircraft? Minor damage from anti-aircraft fire, but fully operational. The A-10 performed exactly as designed. Walsh made several notes, then looked up at Harrison. Colonel, what was the status of your other aircraft during this incident? Harrison's jaw tightened. The F-35 squadron was conducting scheduled maintenance, and the F-18 unit had just completed training exercises and was refueling. How long before they could have responded to Alpha Squad's emergency? Estimated 20 to 25 minutes. And Alpha Squad's tactical situation? Harrison hesitated. They were under significant pressure. Stevens pressed harder. Colonel, in your professional assessment, would Alpha Squad have survived 25 minutes of continued artillery bombardment? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Everyone in the room knew the answer, and Harrison's reluctance to state it revealed his dilemma. Admitting that Alpha Squad wouldn't have survived meant acknowledging that Alicia had been right to disobey his orders. That's speculative, Harrison finally said. No, sir, it's tactical analysis, Alicia interjected. Based on the rate of fire and accuracy of enemy artillery, Alpha Squad had maybe 10 minutes before their position became untenable. They were already taking direct hits when I arrived. Walsh closed her legal pad. Captain Brennan, do you have anything else you'd like to add to your statement? Alicia thought of the grateful voices from Alpha Squad, the perfect execution of a mission everyone said was impossible, and the proof that experience and the right equipment could triumph over bureaucratic preferences. Ma'am, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the United States. Sometimes that oath requires difficult decisions. I believe I made the right choice. Harrison's face was purple with rage. You believe you made the right choice? You directly disobeyed orders from a superior officer during a combat situation. That's mutiny, Captain. No, sir, Alicia replied calmly. That's leadership. The word hung in the room like a gauntlet thrown down. Alicia had just accused Harrison of failing to lead when leadership mattered most, of choosing procedure over people, politics over principles. Walsh gathered her materials. This hearing is concluded. Captain Brennan, you're restricted to base pending further investigation. Colonel Harrison, I'll need complete documentation of all communications during the incident, including radio logs and command decisions. As the officers filed out, Stevens paused beside Alicia's chair. Captain, you know this could end your career. Yes, sir. But 12 families won't be attending funerals, and that's worth any career. Stevens nodded slowly and left the room, leaving Alicia alone with the weight of her decision and the uncertain future that awaited her. 3 days after the hearing, Chief Master Sergeant Hayes knocked on Alicia's quarters door with an expression that mixed concern with barely suppressed excitement. She'd been confined to base, stripped of flight status, and relegated to administrative duties while the investigation continued. The isolation felt worse than combat, at least in war zones. She'd known who her enemies were. Captain, you need to see this, Hayes said, holding a thick folder marked with security classifications. Alicia gestured him inside, noting his careful check of the corridor before closing the door. What is it, Chief? Alpha Squad's after-action report just came through channels. Harrison tried to classify it and limit distribution, but copies made it to some interesting places before he could lock it down. Hayes spread the documents across her small table, and Alicia felt her breath catch as she read the detailed account of the rescue mission. The ground team had documented everything: the timeline of their emergency, the exact moment they'd received her assistance, and the precision of her attack runs. "Listen to this," Hayes said, reading from the report. Quote, "The pilot's accuracy was unprecedented in our experience. 3 artillery positions neutralized with minimal ammunition expenditure, no collateral damage, and no risk to friendly forces despite danger close engagement distances. Professional assessment. This was a textbook demonstration of close air support capabilities." But it was the next paragraph that made Alicia's hands tremble as she read it herself. Time analysis shows that Raven 1-3 arrived at our position approximately 14 minutes before the earliest possible arrival of official air support. Based on enemy fire intensity and accuracy, our team would not have survived the additional wait time. This pilot's intervention directly saved 12 lives. Hayes pulled out another document. It gets better. The team leader submitted a formal commendation request. He's recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross. Alicia stared at the papers, hardly believing what she was reading. Alpha Squad hadn't just survived. They documented the entire incident with the kind of detailed analysis that would be impossible for Harrison to dismiss or suppress. "There's more," Hayes continued. "Remember how Harrison said modern aircraft would have been more effective? Alpha Squad's technical analysis says otherwise. They documented that the enemy positions were in terrain that would have made precision-guided munitions ineffective. Too much overhead cover, too close to friendly forces. They specifically noted that the mission required visual targeting and the kind of sustained fire precision that only the A-10's cannon system could provide." The implications were staggering. Not only had Alicia's obsolete aircraft been the right tool for the job, it had been the only tool that could have accomplished the mission successfully. Harrison's preferred modern fighters wouldn't just have been slower to respond, they would have been less effective once they arrived. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Hayes quickly gathered the documents as Captain Morrison slipped through the door, looking nervous but determined. "Jake, you shouldn't be here," Alicia said. "Harrison's watching everything I do." "That's exactly why I need to be here," Morrison replied. "Alicia, things are happening that Harrison doesn't know about. Word of your mission got out beyond this base." Morrison pulled out his phone and showed her a message from a contact at the Pentagon. "Remember Colonel Patricia Williams from Advanced Tactical Development?" She heard about the incident and started asking questions. Alicia knew Williams by reputation, a respected officer who specialized in evaluating combat effectiveness and tactical innovations. If Williams was interested, it meant the story had reached levels where Harrison's influence was limited. "What kind of questions?" Alicia asked. "The kind that focus on results rather than regulations," Morrison said. "She wants complete mission data, including aircraft performance, ammunition expenditure, and tactical effectiveness. She's also requesting your complete service record and combat history." Hayes chuckled grimly. Harrison's worst nightmare, someone who cares more about what works than what looks good in briefing slides. Morrison's phone buzzed with another message. He read it quickly, then looked up with amazement. Williams isn't the only one asking questions. Apparently, word reached some of the ground commanders whose units you've supported in previous deployments. They're submitting their own statements about your combat effectiveness. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Harrison had assumed he could control the narrative by keeping the incident contained within his command. But combat operations created records and relationships that extended far beyond any single base or commanding officer. "There's something else," Morrison continued hesitantly. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but the base communications logs from that night show something interesting. What kind of something? Harrison never actually ordered air support from MacDill or any other base. When he told Alpha Squad that help was 15 minutes away, there was no help coming. You weren't just faster than official air support. You were the only air support. Alicia felt the blood drain from her face. Harrison hadn't just been slow to respond. He'd lied to dying soldiers about help that didn't exist. His anger about her unauthorized mission wasn't about protocol violations. It was about being exposed as someone who'd been willing to let soldiers die rather than admit his judgment might be wrong. Hayes stood up abruptly. I need to make some calls. Captain, you might want to start preparing for a very different kind of hearing. What do you mean? I mean the kind where they ask Harrison to explain why he had combat-ready assets available and chose not to use them while American soldiers were dying. After Hayes and Morrison left, Alicia sat alone with the documentation of her missions. Success. For months, Harrison had systematically undermined her confidence, made her question her abilities, and marginalized her contributions. But the evidence was undeniable. When lives hung in the balance, her obsolete aircraft and questionable judgment had succeeded where his modern approach had failed completely. Her phone rang, displaying a number she didn't recognize with a Washington area code. Captain Brennan? This is Colonel Williams from Pentagon Tactical Development. I believe we need to talk. The conversation that followed changed everything. Williams wasn't interested in the politics or personality conflicts that had dominated Harrison's investigation. She wanted facts. Mission parameters, tactical challenges, aircraft performance, and quantifiable results. Captain, I've reviewed preliminary reports from Alpha Squad, and frankly, what you accomplished shouldn't have been possible under those conditions. I need to understand how you achieved that level of precision. For the first time in months, Alicia found herself speaking to someone who understood what real combat looked like. Someone who cared more about effectiveness than appearance. Ma'am, the A-10 is designed specifically for close air support in contested environments. When you combine that platform with experienced tactical knowledge, experience that apparently your current commanding officer has chosen to dismiss, Williams interrupted. Captain, I want you to know that multiple ground commanders have contacted my office specifically to discuss your combat record. The consensus is remarkably consistent. What kind of consensus, ma'am? That you're one of the most effective close air support pilots they've worked with. Several mentioned specific incidents where your intervention was the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Alicia closed her eyes, feeling validation she hadn't experienced since arriving at Whitman. Thank you, ma'am. That means more than you know. Captain, tomorrow you're going to receive orders for a new hearing. Not a disciplinary proceeding, a tactical evaluation. I'll be conducting it personally, and I'll be very interested in Colonel Harrison's explanation of his decision-making process. As the call ended, Alicia realized that Harrison's attempt to destroy her career had backfired spectacularly. His dismissal of her capabilities and his failure to support Alpha Squad had created a paper trail that reached the highest levels of military aviation. The investigation was no longer about whether she'd violated regulations. It was about whether Harrison was competent to command combat operations. The next morning would bring a very different kind of reckoning, one where experience and results mattered more than politics and prejudice. Harrison had spent months proving that Alicia didn't belong in his version of the military. Now, she was about to prove that his version of the military was exactly what was wrong with it. The hearing room at Base Whitman had been transformed for Colonel Williams's investigation. Gone were Harrison's carefully arranged tribunal and intimidating setup. Instead, Williams sat at a simple table with recording equipment and a stack of files that seemed to contain damning evidence from multiple sources. Harrison entered with visible confidence, clearly believing he could control this proceeding the same way he'd managed everything else on his base. He dressed in his most impressive uniform, complete with ribbons from various peacetime assignments and ceremonial duties. "Colonel Harrison," Williams began without preamble, "I've spent considerable time reviewing the events of 4 nights ago, and I have questions about your command decisions during that incident. Ma'am, I'm prepared to explain why Captain Brennan's unauthorized actions represented a serious breach of military discipline and, actually," Williams interrupted, "I'm more interested in your authorized actions, or rather, your lack of them." She opened the first file and spread communication logs across the table. At 0430 hours, you received an emergency distress call from Alpha Squad requesting immediate air support. What was your response? Harrison shifted slightly, his confidence wavering. "I initiated standard protocols for emergency air support deployment." "Which standard protocols specifically?" I ordered my staff to determine available aircraft and estimated response times." Williams consulted her notes. "According to communication logs, you were informed that your F-35 squadron was grounded for maintenance and your F-18 unit was refueling after training exercises, correct?" "That's correct." "You were also informed that Captain Brennan's A-10 was immediately available for deployment. What was your response to that information?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "I determined that the A-10 was not suitable for the mission requirements." "Based on what analysis?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Harrison had made his decision based on prejudice and personal animosity, not tactical assessment. And everyone in the room knew it. "Based on my professional judgment that modern warfare requires modern capabilities." Williams pulled out another document. "I have Alpha Squad's post-mission technical analysis. They specifically noted that the terrain and tactical situation would have made precision-guided munitions ineffective, and that the mission required sustained fire precision that only the A-10's cannon system could provide. Were you aware of these tactical factors when you made your decision?" "I had general knowledge of the operational area." "General knowledge," Williams repeated flatly. "Colonel, did you conduct any tactical assessment of the specific challenges Alpha Squad was facing?" Harrison's silence was answer enough. He'd made his decision to exclude Alicia without considering the actual mission requirements or tactical. Williams opened another file. "Let's discuss your communication with Alpha Squad. At 0-4-30-5, you told them that air support was 15 minutes away. What air support were you referring to?" Harrison's face went pale. "I was providing them with an estimated response time." "Estimated based on what?" "You hadn't contacted MacDill Air Force Base or any other installation. No aircraft had been dispatched. There was no air support 15 minutes away." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Harrison had lied to dying soldiers, giving them false hope while refusing to deploy the one aircraft that could actually help them. "I was attempting to maintain their morale during a difficult situation." "You were lying to American soldiers who were about to die," Williams said, her voice carrying the cold authority of someone who'd seen real combat. "Soldiers who modified their tactical decisions based on your false information about incoming support." She pulled out the next document. "Captain Brennan, please explain your decision-making process during this incident." Alicia had prepared for this moment, knowing that her career hinged on her ability to articulate why she'd chosen duty over orders. "Ma'am, I monitored the emergency communications and recognized that Alpha Squad faced certain death without immediate air support. Based on my combat experience and assessment of the tactical situation, I determined that my aircraft was not only capable of providing effective support, but was the only available asset that could respond in time." "What was your estimated response?" "Time? 14 minutes to target, which proved accurate." Williams turned back to Harrison. "Colonel, Captain Brennan's aircraft reached Alpha Squad 14 minutes before your 15-minute estimate. Even if you had actually dispatched air support when you claimed, her response would have been faster." The math was devastating. Not only had Harrison refused to use his most effective available asset, he'd lied about having any alternatives, while a more capable solution sat ready on his own flight line. Furthermore, Williams continued, Alpha Squad's after-action report documents that Captain Brennan's intervention directly saved 12 lives. They specifically noted that enemy artillery would have overrun their position within minutes of her arrival time. She spread photographs across the table showing the precision of Alicia's strikes. 3 enemy positions neutralized with 60 rounds of ammunition. 0 collateral damage. 0 friendly casualties. Colonel Harrison, in your professional opinion, could your preferred F-35 or F-18 aircraft have achieved this level of precision in these specific conditions? Harrison stared at the photographs, his silence admitting what his pride wouldn't let him say aloud. The mission had required exactly the kind of close-quarters, danger-close precision that the A-10 was designed for, and that more sophisticated aircraft couldn't match. Williams pulled out the final file. "Colonel, I've received statements from 7 different ground commanders who've worked with Captain Brennan in combat situations. They describe her as one of the most effective close air support pilots in the service. Yet your fitness reports consistently rate her as unsatisfactory. How do you explain this discrepancy? Captain Brennan has shown consistent inability to adapt to modern military doctrine and has demonstrated questionable judgment regarding what, Colonel? Saving lives? Following her oath to support and defend American forces? Or refusing to accept your personal bias against her aircraft and experience?" The question destroyed Harrison's last refuge. Williams had systematically dismantled every aspect of his case, revealing it as nothing more than ego and prejudice dressed up as military doctrine. "Ma'am, Captain Brennan directly disobeyed my orders." "Yes, she did. And because of that disobedience, 12 American soldiers are alive today instead of dead. Meanwhile, your adherence to what you call proper procedure would have resulted in those same soldiers being killed while you lied to them about help that wasn't coming." Williams closed her files and looked directly at Harrison. "Colonel, effective immediately. You're relieved of command pending a full investigation into your fitness for leadership positions. Your decisions during this incident demonstrated complete failure to understand tactical requirements, inability to utilize available assets effectively, and willingness to sacrifice American lives rather than admit error." Harrison's face went through a series of expressions: shock, denial, rage, and finally the hollow realization that his career was over. Williams turned to Alicia. "Captain Brennan, you violated direct orders from a superior officer. However, your actions saved 12 lives that would have been lost due to your commanding officer's incompetence. The Pentagon is recommending you for the distinguished flying cross and immediate reassignment to a position where your skills and judgment will be properly valued." Alicia felt tears sting her eyes as months of systematic abuse and marginalization were finally acknowledged and reversed. "Furthermore," Williams continued, "your unauthorized mission has sparked a comprehensive review of close air support doctrine and aircraft utilization. Your demonstration that older, specialized platforms can outperform newer, multi-purpose aircraft in specific tactical situations is reshaping how we think about air-ground coordination." As Harrison was escorted from the room, his career in ruins, Alicia realized that her decision to choose duty over orders had accomplished something beyond saving Alpha Squad. It had exposed the dangerous gap between military politics and military effectiveness, proving that experience and the right tools could triumph over bureaucracy and prejudice. The obsolete aircraft and unfit pilot had not only succeeded where modern doctrine had failed, they'd revealed fundamental flaws in how the military valued capability versus appearance. Harrison's downfall was complete, but more importantly, Alicia's vindication was absolute. 6 months after Harrison's dismissal, Captain Alicia Brennan stood before a different kind of gathering at the Pentagon. The conference room was filled with senior officers, defense contractors, and policymakers who'd come to hear about the Whitman incident and its implications for military aviation doctrine. General Rebecca Martinez, the Air Force's Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, introduced the session with words that would have been unimaginable during Harrison's reign of bureaucratic terror. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to discuss a mission that challenged everything we thought we knew about modern air warfare. Captain Brennan's unauthorized rescue of Alpha Squad has forced us to reevaluate our assumptions about aircraft capabilities, pilot experience, and the true meaning of military effectiveness. Alicia wore her dress uniform with the distinguished Flying Cross prominently displayed alongside her other combat decorations. The medal represented more than recognition for a single mission. It symbolized the vindication of every pilot who'd been dismissed for flying obsolete aircraft or practicing outdated tactics. The tactical analysis of Captain Brennan's mission reveals something troubling about our acquisition priorities. General Martinez continued. We've invested billions in multi-purpose platforms while neglecting specialized capabilities that prove crucial in specific scenarios. The presentation that followed used Alicia's mission as a case study in the gap between theoretical capability and practical application. The F-35 and V-10 aircraft that Harrison had preferred were indeed faster, more sophisticated, and more expensive. But they couldn't loiter over target areas for extended periods, couldn't deliver sustained precision fire in danger-close situations, and couldn't absorb the kind of battle damage that the A-10 routinely survived. Most importantly, the general noted, this incident demonstrates that pilot experience and tactical judgment remain irreplaceable factors in combat effectiveness. No amount of advanced technology can substitute for a pilot who understands both their aircraft's capabilities and the realities of ground combat. After the briefing, Alicia found herself surrounded by officers eager to discuss her mission and its lessons. The conversations were starkly different from her interactions with Harrison. These people wanted to learn from her experience rather than dismiss it. Colonel Williams approached with news that would define the next phase of Alicia's career. Captain, how would you feel about leading a new program focused on close air support doctrine and pilot training? What kind of program, ma'am? We're establishing the Combat Aviation Effectiveness Center. Its mission is to identify gaps between procurement priorities and battlefield requirements. You'd be training pilots in danger-close engagement techniques and advising on aircraft modifications that enhance real-world capability rather than just specifications. The offer represented everything Alicia had hoped for but never expected. Chance to ensure that other pilots wouldn't face the kind of systematic dismissal she'd endured under Harrison. I'd be honored, ma'am. As the conference ended, Alicia walked through the Pentagon corridors, past portraits of military leaders who'd shaped American aviation history. She thought about Harrison, who'd been quietly reassigned to a logistics position where his inability to recognize combat capability would do less damage. His downfall had been swift and complete, but more importantly, it had exposed systemic problems that extended far beyond one base commander. That evening, Alicia received a call from Sergeant Rodriguez, now serving as acting communications chief at Whitman while the base reorganized under new leadership. Captain, I thought you'd want to know we got a message from Alpha Squad today. They're dedicating their unit citation to you. They wanted to make sure you knew that every mission they complete is possible because you brought them home. Alicia, felt the familiar tightness in her throat that came with reminders of that night's significance. 12 soldiers had continued their military careers, returned to their families, and contributed to ongoing operations because she'd chosen to act when action was needed. "How's the base adapting to the changes?" she asked. "Better than anyone expected." The new commander actually listens to pilot recommendations and makes decisions based on mission requirements rather than aircraft age. It's like having a real military leader instead of a politician in uniform. The conversation reminded Alicia that her victory had created ripple effects extending far beyond her personal vindication. Harrison's dismissal had sent a message throughout the Air Force that competence mattered more than politics, that results were more important than appearance. A week later, Alicia received a package containing something that would have seemed impossible during her darkest days at Whitman. It was a signed photograph from the 12 members of Alpha Squad, taken at their unit ceremony. The inscription read, "To Captain Brennan, the pilot who proved that courage matters more than permission." Attached was a letter from the team leader, explaining how their rescue had become legendary within special operations communities. Units facing dangerous missions now specifically requested air support from pilots trained in Alicia's techniques, knowing that experience and specialized capability could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The letter concluded with words that captured the broader significance of that night's events. "You didn't just save our lives. You reminded the military that its primary mission is protecting American forces, not protecting careers or following procedures that put politics ahead of people." As Alicia prepared for her new assignment at the Combat Aviation Effectiveness Center, she reflected on the journey from Harrison's briefing room humiliation to Pentagon recognition. The path had required her to risk everything she'd worked for, to choose duty over orders and conscience over career advancement, but the outcome had validated a principle that Harrison never understood. The military's strength came from its people and their dedication to mission accomplishment, not from impressive equipment or bureaucratic compliance. Her old A-10, now permanently assigned to the Effectiveness Center as a training aircraft, waited on the flight line like a faithful guardian. The ungainly aircraft that Harrison had dismissed as obsolete had become the foundation for new doctrine that would save countless lives in future operations. Standing beside her aircraft as the sun set over the Virginia landscape, Alicia thought about the 12 soldiers who were alive because she refused to let bureaucracy triumph over duty. Their survival had justified every risk, every consequence, every moment of uncertainty during her darkest days at Whitman. Harrison had tried to destroy her for flying an obsolete aircraft with questionable judgment. Instead, he created an opportunity for her to prove that some things, courage, competence, and commitment to protecting American lives, never became obsolete. The military was better for Harrison's failure and stronger for Alicia's success. And somewhere, Alpha Squad continued their missions knowing that when they needed help most, someone had answered their call regardless of the personal cost. That was the true measure of military service, and it was a standard that no amount of political maneuvering or bureaucratic preference could diminish. Captain Alicia Brennan had learned to fly in order to serve something greater than herself. On one critical night, when everything she'd worked for hung in the balance, she'd proven that service meant choosing what was right over what was safe. The A-10's engines had never sounded so beautiful as they did when carrying that lesson home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.